So this is really important, and I certainly have seen it with some of the organizations that I've been working with outside of Zen, that there's something about a deep spiritual practice that involves a relationship to a lack of safety. Yet you also, in your Sangha, you have a really beautiful relationship to safety. So you're not advocating that we be unsafe necessarily. It's
Yes.
done very skillfully.
Yes.
And so how do you walk that line between a depth of practice that gets you beyond ego and something that allows you to be safe enough to do the work that I know that you advocate that we need to do?
Now, this is a much deeper question, and it's a very important question. There is post-traumatic stress syndrome. You have to be very careful not to traumatize somebody or activate trauma that's already there so that they become overwhelmed and totally shut down. But there's also something that is not well known that's post-traumatic growth syndrome, where you actually break through. So this is actually dialectical. You know Hegel's thesis, antithesis, new thesis, breakdown.
Or break down or break through.
Breakdown or breakthrough.
And that's a very controversial, I know that idea, there is evidence for it in trauma work, that some people experience trauma and they explode into a new level of growth. Yes. But it's very controversial because people feel it shames the people that don't.
So it's only controversial at a certain altitude of consciousness. Mm-hmm. The postmodern liberals, if we want to really articulate their ideology, I would say that it's postmodern egalitarian relativism. It's a set of beliefs and values that is really an ideology that has a certain set of beliefs and values that we could identify that is very popular, especially in America. I find it quite different in Europe. Mm-hmm. So everyone has to be equal, even if they're not. We have to pretend that they are. Everybody has to be safe. Everybody can only have positive emotions. We cannot allow any aggression, any anger. And
sounds like kindergarten.
Well, it is kindergarten from my perspective. That's about how much gets done.
Right.
This is, I love a beautiful Buddhist teacher by the name of Stephen Levine, who has passed away, did a lot of death and dying work. And he said it so clearly. He worked with a lot of prisoners on death row that knew the exact moment they were going to die. And he sat with them, he worked with them. And he found that even these prisoners didn't believe they were going to die. They imagined that they would come back after the execution and tell their cellmates what it was like to die. That's just the way the mind works. What he said was safety is the most unsafe spiritual path you can take. It leaves you frozen in fear, unable to take risks, unable to try anything new, unable to learn from your mistakes. It is a horrible strategy for spiritual growth or for human growth. It just doesn't work. And yet a degree of fundamental safety is crucial. This is the first milestone in attachment theory. If you don't have safety as a newborn infant, you're not going to get anything. In fact, you're very likely to develop a psychosis if that safety is interrupted radically and never stabilized. Your growth is stuck right at that developmental level. So safety is crucial. And yet, as we're not infants anymore, it becomes problematic.
So what you're saying is, as in your work as a Zen teacher, that you're tracking that you don't want to re-traumatize people, that there's an awareness that there can be traumas, kleshas that can exist, stuck points, and that you and your senior students and people that are doing this work are trained to recognize when there might be a trauma and not to poke it unskillfully.
Yes. So
and in there's a relationship to safety. in the context of growth.
Yes. So this is such an important topic. Let's go slow.
Great.
And let's make it a dialogue.
Great.
What I've found personally, since I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, and when I learn the most is when I'm challenged the hardest. You want to get my attention? Kick me in the head. You've got my attention. Now I'm ready to learn. I learned that in the martial arts, as you've learned it. It's how you learn to follow the rules and develop respect for others, respect for yourself, discipline, and devoted practice. These are the traditional values that most people today didn't have an opportunity to learn. And I wouldn't have either had I not become a black belt in the martial arts. You know, you've surpassed my studies in the martial arts. But these are the qualities that you have embodied and manifest every day. Most people don't have these qualities.
Right.
So when I'm working with people, it was really hard for me to learn that everybody doesn't learn like I do. You can't kick everybody in the head. But I finally have learned that. I've learned that when someone is stubbornly resisting a lie they're telling themselves, that's a time to challenge them with great intensity. But when all of a sudden I watch the light go out of their eyes as though they've crawled back into a cave to be safe, that I must completely back off energetically. And I must make great room and treat them with tender care so that they don't have to run away.
So they don't have to care for themselves.
Well, they don't have to be overwhelmed and really disappear. They're not traumatized
So
or re-traumatized.
dissociating, in other words, some form
Exactly.
of... Right.
A form of dissociation.
Right.
And this has been very difficult for me to learn as a teacher. It goes against the way that I personally learn. And there aren't very many people that learn like I do. I would say you probably don't, although you've learned similar lessons, but I'll bet your learning style was very different. Much more intelligent.
Well, we'll see.
Or sophisticated. Mine was pretty simple.
Right.
Yeah. So this is so important, how to challenge people just enough that they'll go through that dialectical breakthrough. Great. And challenge them not so much that they'll go through the dialectical breakdown.
And the problem then I'm hearing you identify is that with postmodern spirituality, with an emphasis on safety, is that it encourages neither. Sounds like people just sort of stay where they are.
They stay stuck.
And they get to feel good, they think, about what's going on.
They pretend to feel good.
Right.
It becomes all about feeling good.
Right.
So it just breaks my heart.
As opposed to
growing and awakening and becoming real. It's being nice at the expense of being real has become what to do. Right. And it's tragic. The
being
consequences are tragic.
Being nice at the expense of being real.
Yes.
Yeah. Another way would be to say that would be being nice instead of speaking the truth.
Well, that's part of being real, speaking the truth.
Right.
And it's ironic because right now women want to find their voice and speak their truth. I'm all for that. My God, their voice has been throttled for 10,000 years. I encourage every woman that I see trying to speak her truth to speak her truth. I make room for that. And I'm very conscious that it's so easy to traumatize or re-traumatize them, that I give them room to speak. But I notice that culturally what's happening, there's one thing happening for the individual who's finding her voice. There's another thing that's happening for the culture that's suppressing male voices. And that is also tragic.
Sort of becoming the thing that they hate the most.
Yes. So the cultural collective rules are to keep order. The individual breaks those rules, causes trouble, that's what creativity is. How do we create new culture? We break the existing rules.
And there's an emergence, a novel emergence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is duplicated because it
Right.
works. So we find culture and individuality in direct opposition to each other.
Right, right. And the culture that we're in now is, would you say it's particularly challenging as a spiritual teacher, the way people are enculturated now as they come to you and what they have as opposed to, say, 20 years ago or 30 years ago?
It is hopelessly ineffective as a spiritual path. Hopelessly ineffective.